Dr. Abadian, welcome to studio. It's so good to have you. You know what? Nobody knows what's been happening behind the scenes, but because of Sousan coming to the house today, we ended up just having this moment together. And I think the reason why all of that unfolded is that your heart is so good.
Thank you. Well, our hearts together. I'm so honored to be here and
to
have this opportunity with you.
So listen, as a toddler, you actually had a near-death experience. And we all know by now that if you die, it can change you. But to have a near-death experience and actually come back, what transpired?
Well, I didn't recall the experience till later in life. When I was meditating, it surfaced. But what I remember from the experience at this point in time is that I pulled out of my body. I was watching myself from above, and in fact didn't want to come back. And I was resistant. And I had two what I call spirit guides at this point in time, who I think have accompanied me from other times, previous lifetimes, some may think. That were there and that were saying I needed to return. And I was basically having a tantrum. I think I was a toddler, a year and a half, 2 years old, and saying I didn't want to go back. This isn't what I agreed to. And life is too hard. I didn't imagine it was going to be this way. And they were saying, no, you're not done yet. So I remember that, and then being pulled back in and being caught in kind of a claustrophobic feeling in my body.
Do you know how much research has been done with near-death experience? I remembered I've interviewed so many individuals who've been doing this research. 99% of people who have had a near-death experience come back a better version.
Well, I don't know what I was like before, so I can't tell you.
Well, the thing is, they started to realize that life was really meant to love and to live and to be.
Yes.
And they realized that even though some said they didn't want to come back, when they did come back, they were never the same people.
I'm sure that's the case. I was a very spiritual child from a very young age.
I bet. So that's in your whole aura.
I think what happened is it was very confusing to me. I also think that I lost my sense of boundaries.
Yeah.
So it was an adult life that I feel like I fully came back into my body, actually. And in some ways, I think I was afraid to be in my body. Life on Earth felt a little bit dangerous.
Yeah.
And but also love. I think love always, even as a young child, really motivated me. And I think I was confused. I remember feeling confused, like I didn't know the rules of the game on Earth.
Right.
Like, how do people treat each other this way? I don't get it. I don't get why they're acting this way. You know, how am I supposed to act? My mother, who's still alive and very much in my life, I remember as a child would tell me, don't smile so much, don't give so much away, and don't be so honest.
You know, she was so old school.
Exactly. Well, she was trying to protect me, right? Because I didn't have boundaries.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to protect myself in some ways. And she was right. I mean, I got into so much trouble over my many years because I didn't know how to set proper boundaries and care for myself.
Well, one is maybe you didn't know how to set proper boundaries, but also maybe people didn't understand the beauty of your authenticity.
Thank you for saying that.
And I think that's something that we must all begin to invite in our lives, because I've been observing for myself consistently, why do I have to always be the one that refrains, work on myself, be the better version, while you just continue to stay that way? I think that sometimes we're being called to invite people to even get higher too by telling them, I might not be initiating boundaries with you, that's because I trust and I honor that there's something more about you.
Yes.
That you and I can actually have an authentic relationship. So you have a profound journey. You love to study, don't you?
I do.
You just keep going back to school.
The Earth is so interesting. But I'm a recovering academic. I stopped getting degrees anyway. But I'm always learning.
So tell me, like currently, what's happening for Sousan, and how is she unfolding as she looks back at all those years of study and going into this degree, this? I mean, how has that shaped you, the person?
Thanks for it. What a beautiful question. I'm so grateful for the studies I did, because it didn't come easily for me.
Yeah.
I was not a ready student. You can see I've got a lot of energy. So sitting down and reading books was not always so easy for me. So it was actually discipline for me to learn how to do that, learn how to, I don't think I learned to study until I got to Harvard, actually.
Wow.
And then you had to, it was an extraordinary amount of reading you had to do. So
How'd you end up in Harvard?
It's a long story.
Come on, we've got time. We've got 5 minutes.
How did I end up at Harvard? I mean, I applied. First of all, you've got to apply, and I had prepared myself, and I had gone to a very wonderful college. I went to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, and I was probably Iranian Revolution happened during my college years. I was really distracted in some ways. The country I was born into, people I knew were getting killed. The country was going through revolt. So I was not the best student at Swarthmore, but it really prepared me in some ways.
Sure.
And when I applied to Harvard, I had done many interesting things at that point in time. Did very well in my GREs. I had studied and practiced and done well. And so I got in. I got into this anthropology program. It was kind of a fluke. I applied. It was one of a number of different universities I applied to, and I didn't imagine I'd get in, but I did. And I had gotten into economics programs in the other universities, but this one I got into the anthropology program. So I went, and it led to this, and that led to this, and three degrees later. Because
3 degrees later.
Well, because the questions I was asking weren't answered in any one discipline.
Tell me one of the questions you were asking.
Well, my father was a World Bank official working on poverty alleviation.
Yeah.
So really, I was curious about the little questions like how do we end suffering in the world? But we're looking at,
how do we end suffering in the world?
How do we end suffering? And I was also pre-med when I was in college. I was interested in medicine. But I realized very quickly that I wasn't just interested in the physical form.
Right,
so I really wanted to know what suffering was, and because Iran had gone through a revolution, I wanted to understand why a country would go through that kind of explosion that felt in some ways self-destructive to me. And so I wanted to understand those questions. And then also poverty. I looked at women's poverty primarily because I thought that was the women are the most impacted in many of these places. So I realized economics didn't have all the answers.
Yeah.
I wanted to study anthropology because I wanted to understand how you can honor cultures at the same time that you did development. You have to value certain intrinsic, cultural values. So that's why I studied anthropology. But then when I got into economic development, I looked at income-generating activities for women in Bangladesh and India, for example. I studied BRAC and Grameen Bank, these micro-lending institutions, and realized even if you increase the income of some of the women, they still gave their money to their husbands, who then gamble it away, or So then I studied leadership. How do you empower women? How do you empower people? Then it was how do you raise their consciousness? Because just because they're exercise leadership doesn't mean they're actually exercising it in an ethical way. And so it just started to expand, right? And so then I actually looked at communities. Where I am now, in a way, was birthed because when I started doing working on my doctoral dissertation, I had little kids, and I didn't want to be traveling overseas. So I wanted to look at the questions closer to home. So I studied tribal communities, Native American communities in the US and Canada, looking at poverty and violence and why certain communities looked like they were stuck in cycles, intergenerational cycles of poverty and violence.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into trauma and collective trauma, because what I began to understand when I went to these communities and interviewed and talked to people was that the historical traumas that they had experienced were still affecting them now. And so I got very interested in, it's not the only piece, but it's a piece of why people remain stuck, why communities remain stuck. Because they've been so damaged and hurt, and they keep, anyway, it goes around and around cyclically.
I'll tell you something. They just assassinated the president of Haiti.
Yes.
The Haitian president. And, I've been looking at what's been going on with Syria, what's been happening now in the Philippines, Thailand, Russia, all over, Kenya, the Congos, South Africa. And it fascinates me that individuals in position of leadership still have this mentality that a certain group of people aren't valuable enough, even though they're God's children. And when they make their decisions are rooted in how do they stay in power and what do they think their rightedness is. And if a certain group of people get extricated from the planet, it'll be better for them to be where they are. And I've often felt that if we can somehow raise people's spiritual awareness of who they are,
Yes.
they would stop making decisions like that. So I could have told you didn't need to do all those degrees. But in the long term, as we're looking at collective karma, America went through definitely a collective karma of recent before this latest election. And it's also going through collective karma of this new president and the president before. How does collective karma play out? I mean, was there a genesis behind how certain people all end up suffering the same fate? Just recently in South Florida, a condominium, the Champlain Towers, collapsed, and the collective karmas, here were 150 people or more innocently sleeping in their beds, all different age group, and they all suffered the same plight. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, you're much better able to answer that question than I am. I haven't thought enough about collective karma as much as I have about collective trauma. And we have so many different pieces we can talk about, because I'd love to talk to you about leadership, and that's a whole nother topic. But when I looked at on a spiritual level, so now this is all conjecture.
Right.
I can't say that I'm a spiritual teacher of any sort, but when I think about collective karma, with the indigenous peoples, for example, or even the peoples that I was born into. I'm Zoroastrian Iranian, as you may know, and we are the original people of Iran prior to the Muslim conquest, Arab conquest of Iran. And so we're people for 1,400 years that have been subjected to genocide and mass killings, and we're only 20,000 left in Iran. We almost were killed off a century and a half ago. We went, anyway, there was a lot of persecution of Zoroastrians by the Shiite, actually, communities, especially about 150 years ago. In any case, I've wondered about how people are subjected.
What is that consciousness?
Well, even indigenous peoples, like, why is it that they've been subjugated the way they, and so it's heartbreaking. So I don't know the answer to that. I still don't. I've spoken to many spiritual people who've said, well, it's just the ebbs and flows of societies, and they make way for it's a generosity. It shows their evolvedness, that they actually evolve to allow the new people to come in, and they help this community evolve to a higher state.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of justifications. I can't explain it. Why are people subjected to the suffering that they're subjected to?
Or maybe the celebration that they're subjected to. The other day, because I've been interviewing a lot of Bollywood stars, and I was looking at an Instagram post, and with them, there were like 10 of them in this post, and they were all beautiful. And I just paused for the first time in my life. And I went, how did all those beautiful people all seem to find each other like that? And then I started to think about this whole collective karma, or even collective ideas, that is there something that as individual souls we're traveling with? And the trauma that we endure, it's not just because I'm black or white, I'm rich and poor, but at a soul level, we've been traveling with some sort of a traumatic vibration. And somehow together, we somehow have to deal with the settling of that karmic account. I don't know, I asked that.
I think that's true. When I've done past life regression work, and I don't consider it past lives anymore, because they're alternate expressions, as one of my friends calls it, in that lifetimes are happening all at the same time, and on a certain level, there's no time. So in other words, the traumas that I experienced,
let's say 10 lives ago.
Yeah, and I know. I have a lifetime, and of course, we have many even happening at the same time, because it's all fragments of the great soul. But if I had a lifetime as a Native American chief who was unable to save his community from the settler populations, I carried that guilt with me from that lifetime, where I felt like I'd failed my people.
Yes.
Okay, then I have a lifetime in Nazi Germany, actually Nazi Europe. I was in Poland. It was an Austro-Hungarian Empire. As a child, a Jewish child who was then picked up by the Nazis and murdered. And I remember that lifetime too. And the whole time I'm watching this experience of people being killed and destroyed, and
Profound impact on the soul.
and also guilt. I carried the guilt from the time I was the chief who couldn't save his people. Then I was a child who watched the soldier take aim and cross himself as he's taking aim to kill me.
Right.
And wondering about religion. So I'm wondering about religion and Christianity and
you've just tapped into something really, really important, because a lot of people don't maybe explore past life journeys. And my good friend Ainsley MacLeod does that very much. And that's what it is. The connection between collective trauma has to do with multiple layers of lives that we've lived. And I'm just hoping that at some point in time, people will come to start to accept there are multiple layers of lifetimes, that we are living many, many lives at this time, and we're basically playing it out with each other.
Well, and that we carry, just like PTSD, where we have damage.
Yeah.
To me, and I write about this in the personal book that I have written, the Free Me to Love book, that it's like PTSD over lifetimes.
Yeah.
So in this lifetime, some of us have come to clear what traumas we haven't cleared. I couldn't clear it when I was a child in being killed, or I couldn't clear it when I was the native elder. I had to hold it together so that my people were looking at me, and if I fell apart in any way, they would fall apart.
Of course.
So I had to really contain a lot of things, and only in this lifetime, I have the privilege, it's really a privilege to be able to work through some of this stuff and clear it out of my system. So this has been what I've actually been doing.
It's a whole lifetime experience, isn't it?
Well, I hopefully not, because I mean, the first things you get are the traumas, is my experience.
Well, they wake you up. The traumas wake you
They
up
wake you
because
up.
the natural nature of the soul is peace.
But then over time, you get the gifts also from
they
those
come after
lifetimes.
that.
But at first, it's it's some of the traumas from those lifetimes that you clear away.
So let's talk about the book, Free Me to Love. It's your
Yes.
personal journey.
Yes.
Anything exciting that we need to know before we open it up?
Well, it hasn't been published yet, but I'm looking forward to getting it published. Well, what's exciting and terrifying for me is I feel like I'm coming out of the closet with it. Mm-hmm. Even having this conversation with all of you, this is one of the first that I'm having. Because, as you know, I've been trained, my mind has been very well trained, and always the part of me that's asking, is any of this true? Because my mental and my spiritual, they're integrating now.
Yeah.
But to really come and talk about, have a Harvard degree in political economy and then talk about past lives with you they're very, have worked in the State Department and then be talking about this stuff. It feels like it feels very dangerous on some level, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, it's unfortunate that people in certain positions, remember when Marianne Williamson was running for president and
Yes.
she talked about these deep psychic forces, and then Saturday Night Live mocked her about these deep psychic forces. And what I don't understand is everyone has some knowing that there are certain things beyond what our eyes can see that are beyond our capacity. And what's wrong if somebody holds a PhD in political economy and talks about past lives? To me, that's a whole
Absolutely.
person.
Well, that's why I'm coming out of the closet, because I want to give permission
Stay
to all
out
the
of the
people.
closet,
I'm
too.
staying out of the closet. I'm entitled to do that at this point in my life. But here's the thing that I would say for those who do make fun. Look, the other truth is that a lot of folks in the spiritual world have not used their mental capacities, and they're not discerning.
Right.
And so I feel very blessed because I don't poo-poo my mind. I developed it. I think I'm discerning. I do question. I'm not cynical. Mm-hmm. I stay open. But there's room for both the spirit and the spirit made us to have a mind for a reason.
Yeah.
We should develop our mind. We should use it as a gift, a tool. And many people in the spiritual world are misusing. I don't think they're discerning. I don't think they're thinking clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it, in my view, in QAnon, woo-woo-anon. I mean, there's a lot of people in the spiritual world who are QAnon folks. So that's, to me, hard to fathom, right? And in some ways, the fact that we're open and spiritually curious makes us vulnerable to some of this stuff.
Does.
But we have to be discerning and use our minds as well to, and so So it's complicated. So I think there is a reason why people make fun, because some people in the spiritual world are not, I don't think, are using their spiritual gifts in a way that I would feel proud of.
I think what happens is that in the spiritual dimension, there is an interpretation of being really open about whatever your choices are, one. And secondly, I think that I can only speak from my spiritual journey. My lifestyle is so disciplined. So as a result of it being so disciplined from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, the energy that I'm collecting from God's vibrations, it's getting harnessed in my system. So I'm pretty specific in how I live life.
Yes.
But I think that when there is a lack of discipline and I'm like just waiting for some osmosis and some touchings, for individuals who tend to be more right brain, they'll be like, what are you doing? Get grounded. You know, and I think people are looking for that. People want to be spiritual.
Yes.
But I think they are waiting to see a balanced expression
I think
of,
that's
of
right.
a healthy form of
Yes.
spirituality, because
Yeah.
that's in all of us. It's been an interesting year and a half for the whole world. What have you learned the most about Sousan Abadian?
What a good question. I think I'm a lot more resilient than I didn't feel the effects as strongly because I've lived on the edge for a long time. And thank goodness for my spiritual practices, really. That's made me more resilient. So that's what I learned. I learned that I'm incredibly resilient, that I'm very connected to my spiritual, my core essence, soul power. And so that's allowed me to have faith and to move through these pieces. Just to return back to something you were saying earlier, we were talking about earlier, part of what I think the challenge is that if we're coming to spirit from a place of fear, I think fear is the fear energy is partly what takes us off track. What you were saying about your beautiful discipline, which is a discipline to stay in the heart and to stay out of fear and to stay in love and faith and trust and all those beautiful qualities. When we come from that, then we discern in good ways. But if we're coming from fear and then we're drawn to conspiracies and the dark energies and
Which is there.
It's I work in trauma. I know about dark. I mean, I work with child abuse, incest, pedophilia. I mean, all these things that people I've been in the dark
that are done
work,
in the dark. All
that
those
are done
things that are
in
done
the dark.
in the dark.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
you're
that
trying to put light to it so that it can stop being in the dark
Exactly.
and stop happening.
Exactly.
And I wonder about that. One of the things that came up as a positive as a result of the pandemic is sex trafficking had slowed down tremendously, which was great to hear. But domestic violence increased, and so did suicide.
Yeah.
Sometimes you wonder, when do we find the balance? And I think that if we can all turn our attention inwards and begin to identify the thoughts that we're having and check, would this be a thought God would have, or would this be just a thought a confused person would have? I think we would find that discernment. I have to say, I've often thought that I was very close to God, and I've often felt God, but the last few months, it's gotten more for me, like something very intimate, very deep, very pure. There's a lot more quietude towards my conversation with the energy, and I am wanting to be more present for everyone in a very sincere way. Not that I wasn't, but my lifestyle has always been so much on the move.
Yes.
That the last few months now, I'm like, I've done the move. I'm okay now.
That's beautiful.
And
Do
so
you think it has something to do with where you moved? I'm wondering about the energies of the land and the rule.
It could be my relocation.
Yes.
That I would say is a big part of it. But I also think it's just a time, because I've been asking for this for the last 3-4 years. So I think it has happened. So your book, Free Me to Love, is going to be released when? Do we have an idea about what time it's supposed to be coming up?
Well, if I may say honestly, it's in the hands of publishers right now.
Okay.
So they're deciding on that, and whatever they decide, I will self-publish if it doesn't go through that way. But my hope is that Hay House will publish it. That is my desire.
Well, let's throw that out there, that Hay House does publish.
Well, whoever's the best,
Publisher.
who sees the vision of this reaching as many people as it can to serve and help. I think I share very vulnerably my own experience of my own woundedness and my journey to heal myself and to heal what I carried. I was really trying to heal heartbreak.
Yeah.
So it's about kind of the pain that accumulated over a long time, and then after divorce and after a romance that didn't go the way I wanted to thank God. But at the time, it just sort of cracked me open, the whole thing. And as I worked to heal myself, I did a lot of spiritual explorations, including past life work, but really in the theme around shamanic. I did a lot of shamanic practices.
Okay.
And worked with a couple of shamans, went to Peru.
Did you try ayahuasca?
I did.
How was that?
Well, it was powerful and potent. I had done it before also in Ecuador, and it opened for me in Ecuador years before that. It opened up a portal where I was able to access.
I would not be able to have the courage to do that.
Well, it took a lot of courage. I have never done anything.
I just want my consciousness.
Well, you have to give up. It's ultimate giving up control, right?
Yeah.
I hadn't even smoked it. I hadn't done anything before that. So it was really so. But what it gave me, the first experiences I had years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, was I was able to access. It's sort of a place, an opening, and angelic energies.
Sure.
So after that experience, angelic energies became very. They started to. They were always there, but I became aware of them, and they helped me in my work with people. So I used to go to native tribes, do workshops and things, and the presences were with me always.
Powerful.
So that was from the ayahuasca. So I must credit, but I don't believe in doing them all the time. For me,
No, I don't think you should.
I'm too sensitive.
You get into trouble.
And I certainly would.
I think you would. I think you've got a good head on your shoulder. I don't think you need to do any more ayahuasca.
Well, I was told actually after my last journey in Peru, and I worked with a wonderful man named Alberto Villaldo, and he's got a shamanic school. So after my last journey, and my journeys in the book, they were harrowing. So my last journeys were very difficult for me, but they really shattered reality. I got to see kind of reality beyond reality. But I was told in that experience, you will never do this again.
Wow.
And I said, why? Because I said, well, give me an experience of seeing through the eyes of a jaguar. I'd heard all these wonderful mystical experiences that people were having, and I was having really hard ones at that point. And they said, no, we don't want you intoxicated with this. You're not to do this again, because you're going to have these alternate experiences in ordinary reality.
That's one of the reasons why I think I never got too much into intoxicants.
Yes.
Because I always felt like I needed my head to be pretty clear and spot on. So I'm going to do a little spiritual rapid fire before we end our wonderful time together. And as I offer you 2 words, you select one that first comes to mind. Ready?
Okay.
Soul or God?
Soul.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Beach or park?
Beach.
Dancing or sleeping?
Dancing.
Sleeping. No. Reading or watching a movie?
Reading.
Yeah. Says a lot about you. That was great.
Thank you. I have no idea what that meant, but I'm glad.
It meant a lot. Thank you so much, Dr. Sousan Abadian. What a beautiful, wonderful conversation we've just had.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Very sweet.
All right, so for more information, please contact her at www.sousanabadian.com and let her know that you really enjoyed our time together on The Next Normal and American Meditating Radio. Look, there's a lot about life that's going to continue to keep coming in front of you. Just face it. Move forward. Just go head on. Don't be scared. Get yourself back up. Keep going. It will never end anyway, because the soul is eternal. Just continue to keep thriving and asking the right questions. It'll be okay. I promise. It'll be okay. Sometimes it gets ugly, yeah. Sometimes it gets rough, no doubt. But eventually, it also gets okay. Remember, no one can take away your happiness unless you give them permission. And I'm suspecting that we're actually here to learn to love each other the same. Thank you so much for joining us today. Take care and be well. See you soon.